Hello everyone, and welcome back to Echoes of the Night. I know many of you use these stories to unwind or drift off to sleep, so before you get too cozy, I'd love it if you could leave a comment, letting me know where you're listening from. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. It really helps keep the lights on here at Echoes of the Night. Now, let's dive into tonight's tale. Sarah Parker never thought she'd be spending Christmas alone. The 34-year-old graphic designer had envisioned a bustling holiday filled with family and laughter. But this year, life had other plans. A new job in a remote, snowy town and a last-minute project meant she'd be celebrating in solitude for the first time. Her new home, a cozy old cottage tucked at the edge of a forest, seemed like something out of a Christmas card. Snow blanketed the roof. Icicles glistened along the eaves, and the windows offered a warm, amber glow against the cold. She had spent the day decorating, stringing cheerful lights across the porch, and placing a wreath on the weathered front door. Inside, the scent of pine filled the air. A freshly cut Christmas tree stood proudly in the corner of the living room, adorned with twinkling lights and delicate ornaments she'd collected over the years. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls, while holiday music played faintly from a vintage record player. Everything seemed perfect until she noticed it. A single strand of lights on the tree, blinking in a rhythm that felt almost deliberate. She paused, cocking her head. "That's strange," she murmured to herself, brushing it off as a faulty bulb. The evening wore on peacefully, but as Sarah settled onto the couch with a mug of cocoa, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The house creaked softly, as old houses often do, but tonight it felt different, like a quiet observer lurking just beyond the edge of her vision. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the faintest sound of something or someone moving. Sarah tightened her blanket around her, laughing nervously. "It's just the wind," she said aloud, convincing no one but herself. Little did she know, this Christmas would be unlike any other she had ever experienced. The glow of the Christmas tree filled the room with a comforting warmth, but Sarah found herself distracted. She couldn't stop glancing at the blinking strand of lights. She had tried everything, adjusting the plug, twisting the bulbs, but the erratic pattern persisted, pulsing in a way that felt almost deliberate. It was silly, she thought. Lights don't blink with intention. Shaking off the unease, she turned her focus back to the stack of Christmas cards she had been writing. Her pen glided across the thick paper. The fire crackled softly, and holiday music hummed in the background. Everything felt peaceful again until she heard it. A faint tap, tap, tap. Her hand froze mid-sentence, the pen hovering just above the paper. The sound was faint, barely audible over the music, but it was there. Sarah set her pen down and listened intently. Tap, tap, tap. It came again, like fingers drumming against a window pane. Slowly, she turned her head toward the living room window. The snow outside was thick, blanketing everything in a serene white stillness. Nothing stirred. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding and laughed at herself. "Probably just a branch," she muttered, brushing off the creeping unease. Determined to shake the feeling, she got up and walked to the kitchen to refill her mug of cocoa. The room was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from the soft glow of the Christmas lights strung around the window. As she reached for the cocoa tin, she noticed something odd. Her keys, which she distinctly remembered leaving on the kitchen counter, were now on the table across the room. Sarah frowned, her hand hovering over the tin. Had she moved them without realizing it? She retraced her steps in her mind. No, she was sure she'd left them on the counter. A chill ran down her spine, but she shook her head, forcing a laugh. "I'm just tired. It's been a long day." Carrying her cocoa back to the living room, she tried to focus on her cards again. The tapping had stopped. The lights blinked as they always did, and the fire still cast its warm, flickering glow. Yet, the air in the house felt heavier somehow, as if the shadows were leaning in closer. Minutes turned to an hour, and the room was silent save for the ticking of the clock on the mantel. Sarah began to relax again, her earlier unease slipping away. But just as she reached for another card, the record player needle screeched. She flinched, spilling a drop of cocoa onto the carpet. The music stopped abruptly, leaving the room in an unnerving silence. She stared at the player, her heart racing. The needle had lifted itself and now hovered just above the spinning vinyl. Slowly, it lowered again, playing the faint crackle of silence before a soft, eerie melody began, a tune she didn't recognize. "Okay, that's enough," she said, standing abruptly. She crossed the room and turned the player off. The silence that followed was almost worse, like the house itself was holding its breath. Forcing herself to stay calm, Sarah went back to the couch. She wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders and told herself it was all in her head. The lights, the keys, the tapping, it was nothing. Houses creak, things get misplaced, electrical devices malfunction. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. Her eyes darted to the tree again. The strand of lights blinked rhythmically on, off. But now, it wasn't random. It was deliberate. Like a pattern, like a message. Sarah stared, her breath shallow. She shook her head and laughed nervously. "Get a grip, Sarah," she whispered. "You're scaring yourself." But deep down, she knew something wasn't right. And the night had just begun. The fire had long since burned down to embers, but Sarah couldn't bring herself to move. She sat on the couch, her knees tucked to her chest, staring at the Christmas tree. The blinking lights felt accusatory now, a steady, deliberate pattern that sent a shiver up her spine every time she looked. She tried to focus on something else. The stack of Christmas cards lay untouched beside her, her pen rolling off the edge of the coffee table. The house had grown too quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies every creak and sigh of the old wood. The tapping started again. This time it was louder, more insistent. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't coming from the window anymore, it was coming from the hallway. "Hello?" Sarah called, her voice trembling as it echoed into the dark. She stood, clutching the blanket around her like armor. Slowly, she moved toward the hallway, each step hesitant. The tapping stopped just as she reached the threshold. The hallway stretched ahead, cloaked in shadows. The only light came from the faint glow of the Christmas tree in the living room behind her. Sarah squinted, her eyes adjusting to the darkness, and froze. At the far end of the hall, the door to her bedroom was ajar. She always kept it closed. Her stomach twisted as she stood there, staring at the sliver of darkness beyond the door. It wasn't open enough for anyone to slip through, was it? She shook her head. No, she was being ridiculous. Doors don't open on their own, she told herself, stepping cautiously forward. Maybe it hadn't latched properly earlier. Her footsteps were soft, her breathing shallow. She reached the door and pushed it open with a trembling hand. The room was empty, just as she'd left it. The bed was neatly made, her clothes folded on the chair in the corner. Everything was perfectly normal except for the faint, lingering scent of pine. Sarah frowned. She didn't have a real tree. The artificial one in the living room didn't have a smell, and yet, here it was, the earthy scent of fresh pine needles filling the room. She backed out, her pulse quickening, and shut the door firmly behind her. Back in the living room, the tapping had stopped again, replaced by another sound, faint shuffling, like footsteps dragging across the floorboards upstairs. "Nope," she muttered to herself, grabbing her phone. She needed to call someone, anyone. Maybe her sister, Emily, who always knew how to calm her down. But as she dialed, the screen flickered and went black. "Seriously," she groaned, pressing the power button repeatedly. Nothing. The phone was fully charged, she'd just plugged it in earlier. A loud thud upstairs made her jump. It sounded like something heavy had fallen, but she hadn't been up there all day. "Hello?" she called again, her voice trembling. The house didn't answer, but she could feel it closing in around her, the shadows deepening, the air growing heavier. Gathering her courage, Sarah grabbed the fireplace poker and crept toward the stairs. Each step groaned under her weight, the sound magnified in the oppressive silence. When she reached the top, she froze. The hallway upstairs was dark except for the faint glow spilling out from under the attic door. The attic light wasn't supposed to be on. Her breath caught as she stared at the door. The light flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. "Who's there?" she demanded, gripping the poker tightly. Her voice sounded small, swallowed by the thick, unnatural quiet. The light flickered again and went out. Sarah backed away slowly, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She turned and bolted down the stairs, nearly tripping in her haste. She didn't stop until she was back in the living room, her chest heaving as she slammed the door shut behind her. The tapping resumed immediately. This time it was right outside the window. Sarah stood frozen, her eyes locked on the frosted living room window. The tapping was steady now, tap, tap, as if someone or something was trying to get her attention. She gripped the fireplace poker so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The logical part of her mind whispered excuses. It's the wind. It's a loose branch. It's the house settling. But deep down, she knew those explanations didn't fit. This tapping had a rhythm, an intention, as if whatever was outside knew she was watching. She stepped forward hesitantly, her socks silent against the hardwood floor. Each step felt heavier than the last, her breath quickening with every inch she closed. When she finally reached the window, she hesitated, her hand hovering just above the curtain. "Okay, Sarah," she whispered to herself. "Just look. Get it over with." She yanked the curtain aside. The yard was empty. Snow blanketed the lawn, untouched except for her earlier footprints leading to the mailbox. The street beyond was dark and still, lit only by the faint glow of the streetlights. The tapping stopped abruptly, leaving only the muffled hum of the wind outside. Sarah exhaled shakily, letting the curtain fall back into place. "See, nothing," she muttered, trying to convince herself. But the knot of unease in her stomach didn't loosen. She turned back toward the couch, ready to call it a night. That's when she noticed it. The Christmas lights on the tree had stopped blinking. Instead of their usual rhythmic pattern, the bulbs glowed steadily, casting the room in an unnatural, multicolored haze. But something wasn't right. Sarah squinted, her breath catching in her throat. The lights weren't steady after all. They were blinking slowly, deliberately spelling out a pattern. O-N-E. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she stared at the word. The lights flickered again, rearranging themselves. L-O-K. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, no, no." The room suddenly felt colder, the air heavy and oppressive. She stepped back, her heel catching on the edge of the rug. Before she could process what was happening, a loud bang erupted behind her. Sarah spun around. The hallway door had slammed shut on its own. Her chest tightened as she stared at the closed door. She could feel it now, that electric, hair-raising sensation of being watched. The silence wasn't just silence anymore, it was alive, brimming with an invisible presence. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice trembling. The poker in her hand felt useless, a child's toy against whatever this was. There was no response, only the distant sound of creaking wood. She turned back to the Christmas tree, desperate for any sign that this was all in her head. But the lights were blinking again, faster this time. "Run." A sharp whisper sliced through the air, soft but clear. "Sarah." She froze. The voice wasn't hers, and it wasn't her imagination. It was low and breathy, spoken directly into her ear, so close she could feel the phantom warmth of breath on her skin. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up. She bolted toward the front door, her heart hammering in her chest. Her hands fumbled with the lock, the cold brass slipping beneath her frantic grip. She yanked the door open and stumbled out onto the porch, gasping for air. The icy wind bit at her face, snapping her back to reality. For a moment she stood there, clutching the doorframe, the sound of her own breathing the only thing she could hear. But when she turned back to look inside, her blood ran cold. Through the window, she saw the Christmas tree lights blinking rapidly, spelling out a final message. "I see you." Sarah hadn't stepped back inside since that night. The air felt wrong, thick with a presence she couldn't explain. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to stay away from the house, to drive to the nearest hotel and forget this madness. But her feet were rooted to the porch, her mind unwilling to leave. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her from the trance-like state she had fallen into. She pulled it out, the screen lighting up with a text from her best friend, Emily. "Sarah? You okay? You've been quiet all evening." She typed back quickly, "Yeah, just tired." "Everything's fine. I'll call you later." Her thumb hovered over the screen for a moment. Then she typed a second message. "I'll be fine. Don't worry about me." But the words felt hollow, even to her. The truth was, she hadn't been fine since the first whisper. Turning back toward the front door, Sarah took a step inside, the silence wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. The house felt cold, colder than it should have been, even for a winter night. She glanced up at the Christmas tree, half expecting the lights to spell out another cryptic message. But it remained dark, the ornaments still and unmoving. She exhaled a sigh of relief, until she heard it. A faint scratching, like fingernails dragging across wood. It came from the hallway just beyond the corner where the door had slammed earlier. "Not again," she whispered to herself. With hesitant steps, Sarah made her way toward the hallway, her eyes flicking between the shadows. The scratching noise grew louder, more deliberate now, echoing off the walls. But as she rounded the corner, there was nothing but the empty hallway, the light from the living room casting a long, distorted shadow across the floor. The scratching stopped. Her heart beat faster, her breath shallow. "It's nothing," she said aloud, her voice sounding weak even to her own ears. She turned away, moving toward the kitchen to distract herself. But just as her fingers brushed the counter, a cold hand brushed the back of her neck. She whipped around, but no one was there. Her pulse thudded in her ears as she stared at the empty space behind her. It was like being touched by invisible fingers, the air around her suddenly heavier, the pressure on her skin too real to be ignored. Her breath came in shallow bursts, her mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. "It's just the wind, just nerves," she told herself. But her skin crawled, the feeling of being watched pressing down on her chest. She reached for the light switch and flipped it on. The kitchen was bathed in warm yellow light, but the feeling didn't leave. If anything, it intensified. Then, the fridge door swung open on its own. Sarah's heart nearly stopped as she looked at the door, now hanging open, the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Her body moved on its own, instinctively walking toward it. She shut the door with a trembling hand, but before she could step away, she heard the sound again, the soft, unmistakable creak of the floorboards above her. Slowly, Sarah's eyes flicked up to the stairs. She hadn't been upstairs in days, but now, the thought of going up there made her stomach churn. "It's fine. It's just the house settling. It's fine," she repeated over and over in her head, as though her mantra could make everything go back to normal. The moment her foot landed on the first step, she felt it a pressure, like a weight pressing against her from the other side of the door. She froze, staring at the top of the stairs. The air had gone completely still, and for a split second she could have sworn she saw something move in the shadowed hallway above. A shadow impossibly tall, stretching across the walls, blocking out the light. "Hello," her voice cracked. There was no answer, but the feeling of being watched only grew stronger, more suffocating. She backed away from the stairs, bumping into the table behind her. The low growl of the fridge, now muted, was the only sound in the room. "Get a grip, Sarah," she whispered. But her hands were trembling so violently she couldn't even steady them. Just as she turned to leave the kitchen, a soft thud echoed from the hallway, followed by a low, almost inaudible voice that sent ice coursing through her veins. "Sarah." The voice was closer this time, not the whisper she'd heard before, but a rasp, like it was coming from the very walls around her. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment everything went silent. No wind, no creaking, no distant tapping, only a quiet, oppressive darkness pressing in around her. "Sarah." I'm here. And then the Christmas tree lights flickered on once more. Only this time they weren't random. The bulbs blazed to life one by one, revealing a single message. I never left. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat as she stared at the blinking lights on the Christmas tree. The message burned into her mind, I never left. Her eyes darted to the dark corners of the living room, but there was no movement, no sign of what or who was watching her. She felt the weight of the silence pressing in on her like a physical force. Shaking, she grabbed her phone from the coffee table and dialed Emily's number. The phone rang, each tone sounding louder in the emptiness of the house. Come on, pick up, Sarah muttered under her breath. She waited, her fingers drumming anxiously on the table. Finally, Emily answered. Hello, her voice was groggy, as if she'd just woken up. Emily. Thank God, Sarah's voice cracked as she spoke, her words tumbling out faster than she could control. Something's wrong. I don't know what's happening, but this house, something's in it. I swear it's like something's watching me. I keep hearing things, feeling things, and the lights, they keep blinking on and off. There's something wrong here. You need to help me. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Emily didn't speak, and the silence made Sarah's skin crawl. Sarah, listen, Emily finally said, her voice soft but firm. I know you've been under a lot of stress lately, and you've been staying alone in that old house. Maybe you're just exhausted. You need to take a breath, okay? Get some rest and everything will feel better in the morning. Just don't overthink it. Sarah's stomach twisted. Emily, I'm not overthinking it, she pleaded, her words tumbling over each other. I swear to you, I'm not imagining this. It's real. It's... Okay, Emily interrupted, her voice growing distant. Look, I can't help you if you're just going to keep stressing yourself out like this. I'm sure it's nothing. Just sleep. We'll talk in the morning. Before Sarah could respond, the line went dead. Emily, she whispered into the phone, but there was only silence. A chill settled over her, and she could feel it creeping up her spine. Her fingers clenched around the phone, but her thoughts were racing, spiraling. It felt like the walls of the house were closing in on her, the pressure mounting as the reality of her isolation hit her like a freight train. She had no one. Sarah slowly set the phone down on the table, her eyes fixated on the darkened windows outside. The streetlights barely pierced the fog that had settled over the neighborhood. The world outside seemed so far away, so unreachable. Her head spun with a mix of fear and frustration. She had reached out, but no one believed her. Emily had dismissed her fears as stress, her words carrying an undertone of doubt that Sarah couldn't shake. Her hands trembled as she reached for the light switch and flicked it on. The living room remained dim, the faint glow from the Christmas tree the only illumination. She could hear the sound of her own heartbeat now, a heavy thrum in her ears that drowned out the creaking of the house. Then she heard a faint scrape, like something sharp moving against the wooden floor. It came from the hallway again. A cold, sickening dread gripped her chest. Sarah turned toward the sound, but the hallway was empty. The oppressive darkness in the corners seemed to swallow the faint light from the living room, leaving only shadows in its wake. The scrape came again, louder this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, dragging across the floor. Her body froze, every muscle locking in place. She couldn't move. The footsteps were closer now, the air thick with the sound of something dragging, something heavy. It moved along the hallway, then paused right outside the living room door. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat. She swallowed hard, trying to make sense of what was happening. But the longer she stood there, the more the terror spread through her veins, chilling her from the inside out. The door slowly creaked open. A cold gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing the faint glow from the Christmas tree. The house went dark, the silence broken only by the sound of her panicked breathing. She stumbled backward, hands fumbling to find the light switch again, but it wouldn't turn on. The dark corners of the room seemed to close in, the shadows thickening, pressing against her like a physical force. A voice, low and guttural, whispered from the doorway. "It's time to join me." Sarah's heart skipped a beat as the temperature in the room dropped. She couldn't breathe. The voice no, the presence was getting closer. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the door slammed shut. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's legs gave out beneath her, and she collapsed onto the floor, her body trembling uncontrollably. The feeling of being completely and utterly alone in this house was suffocating. She had no one to turn to, no one to believe her. And as the minutes stretched on, she realized the worst part, the thing that terrified her more than anything else, was that the entity in her house wasn't just haunting her. It was waiting. Sarah's mind was fraying at the edges, each thought unraveling faster than she could keep up with. She couldn't escape the feeling that something was always there, just behind her, watching and waiting. The constant dread in the pit of her stomach had become her only companion, a suffocating weight that clung to her skin, pressing deeper into her soul with every passing hour. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't think. Her once comforting home now felt like a trap, each creak of the floorboards, each whisper of wind outside, a reminder that she wasn't alone. The darkness in the corners of the room seemed to grow, curling up against the walls like tendrils, ready to pull her into its cold embrace. Sarah's eyes darted around the room, her breath coming in short gasps. She couldn't do this anymore. She couldn't stay here, in this house that no longer felt like hers. The Christmas lights flickered once more on the tree, their blinking pattern sending a jolt of panic through her. She stared at them, trying to steady her racing heart. "I can't stay here," she thought, her hands shaking as she reached for her phone again. She tried calling Emily once more, praying her friend would pick up this time, but the phone just rang, unanswered. "Please, please, just pick up." Sarah's voice broke, a sob catching in her throat. But no one came. No one answered. She was alone. Desperation flooded her veins as she slammed the phone back onto the table. Her gaze turned to the door, her thoughts clouded with the overwhelming urge to leave, to run, to escape, to find safety from whatever was lurking in the shadows. She stood up shakily, gripping the back of the couch as she forced herself toward the door. Her heart was pounding in her chest, her legs barely supporting her weight. But she couldn't stay here any longer. "I need to leave," she muttered to herself, her voice a raw whisper, a reflection of her broken resolve. As she reached for the door, the handle turned on its own. Sarah froze, her breath catching in her throat. She stared at the door, her fingers trembling just inches away from the handle. It creaked open slowly, but no one stood on the other side, just darkness. She wanted to scream, to flee into the night and never look back, but something held her in place. Something invisible, yet tangible, pulling at her, suffocating her with its presence. "It's not real. It's not real. It's just in my head." She tried to convince herself, but the voice in the back of her mind screamed otherwise. The door was open now, the darkness beyond seeming to beckon her. She stepped forward, her body moving without her full consent, her feet carrying her into the blackness. But before she could take another step, a low, guttural laugh echoed through the hallway. She froze. "No, no, no." The laugh came again, louder this time, mocking her, as if it were pleased with her helplessness. Her breath caught in her throat as the sound wrapped around her like a vice, filling her ears until she couldn't hear anything else. The door slammed shut behind her. "Let me out," Sarah screamed, pounding on the door with all her might, but it wouldn't budge. Her hands, slick with sweat, slid off the smooth wood as she pushed against it again and again. The laughter, that terrible, mocking laughter, filled the air, and she could feel the walls closing in on her. She turned, panic rising in her chest. "Where am I? Where is it?" She felt like she was losing control of her body, her thoughts slipping further from her grasp. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly before her, an oppressive void that threatened to swallow her whole. Her mind raced, trying to figure out what to do, what to make of all of this. Was she losing her mind? Was this all a nightmare? The lights, the sounds, the feeling of something always just behind her. It couldn't be real. Could it? A cold hand brushed against her shoulder, sending a jolt of terror through her body. She whirled around, but no one was there. "Get away from me," Sarah shouted, stepping backward, her hands raised in front of her as if she could ward off an invisible force. But there was nothing. The hall remained empty, quiet, except for the deafening sound of her heart pounding in her ears. The darkness seemed to swell around her, filling every inch of the hallway. The floor creaked beneath her feet, and she could feel the weight of something closing in. The air was thick, suffocating, as if the very atmosphere were trying to choke the life out of her. She had to leave. She had to escape, but her legs wouldn't move. She screamed, but the sound was muffled, as if the walls themselves were trying to swallow her voice. Then she saw it. At the end of the hallway, standing just beyond the reach of the light, a figure. A silhouette, tall and unnaturally still. Its outline was obscured by the darkness, but Sarah could feel its eyes on her, piercing her very soul. It moved, slowly, deliberately, as if savoring every step it took toward her. "It's here." No. Terror exploded through her chest as she spun around and bolted for the door. She reached for the handle, but it wouldn't turn. She pulled with all her strength, but the door was sealed shut. The figure was closer now. She could hear the scraping of its feet against the floor, dragging like nails on a chalkboard. The room seemed to close in on her. The walls felt like they were closing in, and her mind felt as if it might shatter under the weight of it all. "It's here. It's not real. It's not real." But deep down she knew it was. As the figure reached out for her, she let out one final scream, the sound echoing through the empty house, but no one could hear her. No one was coming. Sarah's scream echoed through the darkened house, the sound ringing in her ears long after it had stopped. The figure was almost upon her now, and in that moment she felt every ounce of her strength draining away. Her body trembled with fear, her pulse quickening as the unnatural figure loomed closer. It was tall, impossibly tall. Its shadow stretched across the hallway, contorting unnervingly, as if it had no shape of its own. Its outline shimmered in and out of focus, like it was made from darkness itself, flickering in and out like a malfunctioning light bulb. She could see nothing of its face, only two burning pinpricks of light where its eyes should be. Those eyes, those haunting, glowing eyes, were fixed solely on her, and in them she saw only malice. The air around her felt colder now, impossibly so. She could see her breath fogging in front of her, the chill crawling under her skin. Her skin prickled with the sensation of being touched by something unseen, as though invisible hands were running across her body, drawing tight, suffocating lines around her neck. Her knees wobbled beneath her, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the thing. It was closer now, too close. She could hear its breathing, ragged and strained, though its lips did not move. The faint, guttural growls that came from it vibrated the walls, the sound so unsettling it almost made her ears bleed. She was paralyzed, unable to move, unable to scream again. The entity's presence was suffocating, drowning her in its weight. The Christmas lights, those damned Christmas lights, blinked erratically, casting sharp shadows against the walls. Each flicker of the lights seemed to pulse with life, flickering faster and faster, as if they were reacting to the presence of the thing. Then, without warning, the lights went out. The sudden silence was deafening. Sarah gasped, her heart thundering in her chest. Her eyes struggled to adjust to the dark, but it was no use. The blackness felt thick, like a tangible thing that closed in around her, swallowing everything whole. She couldn't see anything, but she could feel it, the presence of the entity standing just in front of her. She could hear its breath, a sound that clawed at her mind, demanding attention. The air felt heavier now, thick with an oppressive force. And then, it spoke. Its voice was a low, rasping whisper that seemed to come from all directions at once, invading her mind, burrowing into her thoughts. "You shouldn't have come." The words hit her like a physical blow. The cold seeped deeper into her bones and she staggered back, her body begging her to run, to fight. But there was nowhere to go. The hallway seemed endless, stretching forward into the abyss of darkness. She could feel its hands reaching for her, invisible fingers curling around her throat, squeezing tighter with every passing second. This isn't real. This isn't real. Her thoughts screamed in desperation, but the fear in her chest told her otherwise. The air in the house seemed to thicken, vibrating with an unnatural hum, the sound growing louder and more insistent. Her pulse raced, matching the rhythm of the hum, as if they were one and the same. Then, a sound broke through the suffocating silence. A soft, almost delicate noise, like the tap of a finger on glass. The tapping repeated, growing louder, closer. It came from the direction of the living room, the very place where she had first noticed the strange disturbances. Slowly, ever so slowly, she turned her head toward the source of the sound, praying that whatever it was wouldn't be there. But it was. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, its lights now glowing again, blinking erratically. But there was something new, something terrifying. The ornaments on the tree, the ones that had once hung so still and calm, were now moving. Not gently swaying in the breeze, but jerking violently as if being yanked by invisible hands. The tapping sound continued. Closer. Closer. And then bang. A loud crash followed by another and another, as the ornaments began falling from the tree. One by one, they shattered against the floor with bone-jarring noise, glass scattering across the room. But Sarah couldn't look away from the shadows where the tree stood. She could feel the presence, felt it closing in, breathing down her neck. "You shouldn't have stayed," the whisper came again, louder this time, as if the entity was speaking directly into her ear. She could feel the weight of its words pressing into her chest, a physical force she could no longer resist. With a gasp, she turned and ran. Her feet stumbled on the carpet as she bolted down the hallway, her breath coming in frantic gasps. But the house seemed to stretch before her, its walls closing in tighter with every step. The hallway was endless, a twisting, disorienting maze that only grew darker as she ran. She reached the door of the front door and yanked it open, but the night outside seemed darker than it ever had been before. The air outside was thick, clinging to her skin, as if something had followed her out. The door slammed shut behind her, and as she turned back toward the house, she saw it. The Christmas lights. They blinked, just like before, but now they were no longer just blinking. They were staring. Every light on the tree flickered in unison, sending out an eerie glow. The figure stood just behind the tree, its form barely visible, but its eyes, those unholy, glowing eyes, were unmistakable. They locked onto hers, and in that moment Sarah felt herself being pulled back, as if the very ground beneath her feet were trying to drag her back into the house. No, not again. The door slammed open. The thing was coming for her. Sarah's breath came in ragged, desperate gasps as she stood outside the house, the doors thrown wide open behind her. The Christmas lights on the tree blinked furiously, casting eerie, sharp shadows across the yard. She backed away, trembling, but something held her there, something rooted her to the spot, despite her overwhelming urge to run. The figure behind the tree loomed larger now, its presence more oppressive than ever before. It had no distinct shape, only an overwhelming, suffocating darkness that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the flickering lights. Its glowing eyes, the only defining feature, seemed to pierce through her, digging into her soul. "What is it?" Sarah's mind screamed, the question echoing in her thoughts, unanswered, but somewhere deep inside she already knew. Her pulse hammered in her throat as her gaze shifted to the house behind her, The walls, the floors, the very foundation seemed to be alive, vibrating with an energy that grew stronger with every passing moment. And then, she heard it, the softest of whispers, barely audible above the wind, but it came from inside the house. You should have listened. The voice was unmistakable. She knew it instantly. It was her mother's voice, soothing and familiar, yet somehow wrong twisted, as if distorted by something far darker. Sarah spun around, her heart pounding. The door to the house slammed shut with a deafening crash, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. Her mind reeled. Her mother. But her mother had passed away months ago, buried beneath the very ground she now stood on. The house had been empty for all that time, and yet here was her voice, calling to her from within the house. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. She knew there was something sinister behind it all. The figure behind the tree seemed to shift. It moved toward her, but not in the way of a living thing. It was as if the darkness itself flowed across the yard, a liquid form, never touching the ground, but instead hovering just above it. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the thing drew closer. "Don't go back in. You don't know the truth," the voice came again, but this time it wasn't just her mother's voice, it was everyone's voice. A chorus of whispers, murmuring from every corner of the house, from the shadows, from the very air. It was as if the house had come alive with the ghosts of the past, all speaking at once, each voice familiar, and yet strangely foreign. Her mind spun, trying to piece everything together. Her mother's voice, the blinking lights, the strange events, the coldness that had taken over her home. It all felt wrong. It had always felt wrong. She didn't want to, but she knew she had to go back. The truth was waiting for her inside, and it was the only way to stop this nightmare. The only way to end it. With a shaky breath, Sarah turned around and pushed the door open. The air inside the house was thick with tension, a palpable weight pressing against her chest. The lights flickered in the hallway, their glow casting long, distorted shadows across the walls. Each flicker seemed to intensify the sense of dread that consumed her. "Mom?" Her voice cracked as she called out, but no answer came. She took one step inside, and then another, each one heavier than the last. The floor creaked beneath her feet as she moved toward the living room, where the tree stood. The ornaments, shattered and scattered across the floor, were still, their eerie silence almost suffocating. Then her eyes caught something strange. The base of the Christmas tree, where the lights plugged in, flickered once more. But this time, Sarah noticed something different, something hidden. Her pulse quickened as she crouched beside the tree, moving the fallen ornaments aside. Underneath the tinsel, nestled just behind the tree, was a small, old box, its wood warped and cracked with age. The box was unremarkable, yet Sarah felt an inexplicable pull toward it. She reached out, her fingers trembling as she touched its surface. The second her fingers made contact, the air around her seemed to shift. The room grew colder, and the whispering voices grew louder, more frantic. Without thinking, Sarah opened the box. Inside, there was a single photograph, faded and yellowed with time. Her heart stopped. It was a picture of her family, her mother, her father, and herself smiling together in front of the very same Christmas tree that stood now before her. But there was something off about the photo. Her father's face was blurred, as though something in the picture had been erased. And standing behind them in the shadows was a dark figure, one she hadn't noticed before. The figure was tall, featureless, its face obscured by the shadows, but she could feel its presence. It was the same presence that had haunted her ever since she moved back into the house. The entity. It was always there, always watching. The realization hit her like a freight train. This was no ordinary haunting. This wasn't a restless spirit or an angry ghost. This was something far older, far darker, something tied to the very fabric of her family's history. Something that had followed her mother, and now it had found its way to her. The photograph was the key, the object that had held the darkness at bay, the reason the lights blinked, because the entity needed a conduit, a way to reach the living, to drain them, to feed off their fear. It had been waiting, watching for the right moment. And now, it had claimed her. The lights flickered once again, brighter this time, illuminating the room in an unholy glow. The entity was close, too close. As Sarah turned to face the figure one last time, she realized the truth too late. The lights blinked. Shh. And then, they stopped. The room went dark. The entity had won. The silence that followed the final flicker of the Christmas lights was suffocating. It pressed down on Sarah like a weight she could not lift, crushing her chest, choking the breath from her lungs. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the dark, but it was no use. Nothing moved in the shadows. The air was thick with the presence of something that didn't belong, something that didn't care if she was there or not. It was as if the house itself had turned against her. She had heard that sometimes, when the darkness takes hold, it swallows everything. Her heart pounded in her ears as she backed away, her feet stumbling over the debris on the floor, broken ornaments, crushed glass, the remnants of a family Christmas that had long since turned into something unrecognizable. The house felt colder now, colder than she ever remembered. The fire had long since died in the hearth, and the warmth of the holiday season had been replaced by an unnerving chill that settled deep into her bones. The shadows seemed to stretch, elongating as though they were reaching for her. Sarah tried to shake the thought away, but the photo in her hand felt like a burning brand. The image of her family, her mother and her father both smiling, happy, together was now haunted by the presence of that thing behind them, that dark figure, and now it was here, in the house, with her. She wasn't sure how much time had passed. The world outside seemed to fade into nothingness. The walls of the house closed in, pressing her into a corner as she glanced back at the Christmas tree. The lights, which had blinked so violently before, were now completely still. The once festive decorations were now a sickly reflection of what had happened. Her hands shook as she looked at the photo once more. Her gaze moved from the eerie figure lurking in the background to the empty spaces where her father and mother once stood. Had they known? She wondered. Had they been taken by the same thing? And then it struck her. The realization hit her like a thunderclap. The entity wasn't just haunting the house, it had been feeding on the fear of those who lived in it. It had fed off her mother, off her father, and now it was feeding off her too. It had always been part of her family, lurking in the shadows of the past, bound to this house, to this cursed Christmas. There was no escaping it, no breaking free. Suddenly the air shifted. A cold gust of wind blew through the house, though the windows were shut tight. The Christmas tree lights flickered once again, but this time it wasn't a playful blink. They blinked rapidly, violently, as if desperate to make contact. Sarah's body froze. It was closer now. The presence was undeniable. She could feel it like a weight pressing on her chest, like fingers reaching into her ribs, trying to pull her apart. The whispers began again, low and guttural, murmuring words she couldn't quite make out, but she could hear them deep in her skull. "You cannot escape." The voice was everywhere, surrounding her, pressing in on all sides. It was her mother's voice. Yes, but it was no longer hers. It was the entity, wearing her mother's voice like a mask. "It's too late." Sarah turned sharply, but there was nowhere to run. There was nowhere to hide. The door she had exited before was now gone. The window to the outside world had vanished. It was just the house and the figure that had been hiding in the shadows. It was too late. The room began to warp around her. The floor seemed to tilt, and the walls stretched as if they were made of elastic, bending toward her. The Christmas tree twisted grotesquely, its lights blinding in their frantic, erratic flashes. And then, just as suddenly as the madness had started, everything stopped. The lights. The whispers. The motion. It was all gone. The house fell silent. Sarah stood motionless in the center of the room, the photo still clutched in her hand. Her body was cold, but her mind felt disjointed, like the threads of reality were coming undone. The walls of the house had stopped pressing in on her. She could breathe again, but the air still felt thick, like something was smothering her from within. The front door creaked open. A faint sliver of moonlight poured in from the outside, casting a pale light across the floor. Sarah glanced up, her breath catching in her throat. She had never seen the door open on its own. Was she free? Had she escaped? A voice whispered again, this time much closer than before. You can never leave. Sarah's legs buckled beneath her. She fell to the floor, the photo slipping from her fingers. The Christmas tree lights blinked once again, their rhythmic pulse taunting her. They had won. She had lost. But when the camera pulled back, the house remained dark and silent. The lights were still blinking. And the whispers never stopped. End.